There are some who speak through silence, and some who vanish from the noise only to hear the sound of their own souls again. In an age where visibility has become validation, and where the pulse of worth is measured in digital applause, there exists a quiet minority, those who do not post, who slip through the algorithmic lattice without leaving a trace. Their absence becomes its own kind of presence, a whisper in the chaos of perpetual sharing. To not post on social media in the 21st century is, in many ways, an act of rebellion. It is a refusal to perform, to participate in the grand theater of self-presentation where every image is curated, every thought rehearsed, every feeling filtered for mass consumption. Yet beneath this silence lies more than defiance. It is often a manifestation of deep psychology, a subtle intertwining of introspection, autonomy, and self-preservation. The world today demands to be seen. The digital landscape thrives on exposure, the conversion of private life into public commodity. In such an environment, those who remain unseen, who choose invisibility over recognition, often embody a radically different mode of existence. Their silence does not signify disinterest or disengagement, but rather, a complex and deeply personal negotiation with authenticity, identity, and the need for belonging. To understand these people, the ones who do not post, is to step into the psychology of withdrawal, of restraint, of inner abundance. It is to explore the quiet mind that resists external validation and the soul that seeks to live unmeasured, unrecorded, untouched by the scrolling eyes of the collective. They are not disconnected, they are differently connected. Their silence is not emptiness, but a space where thought still breathes freely, uncompressed by the need to perform, uncolonized by the tyranny of content. In the stillness of their digital absence lies a story, not of avoidance, but of preservation. The inward gaze, autonomy, and the desire for privacy. To not post is, in essence, to claim a piece of oneself back from the marketplace of attention, where others scatter fragments of their lives like coins into the wishing well of validation. The non-poster gathers their inner world in quiet containment. They do not abandon connection, but rather seek to protect its depth from dilution. Privacy, for them, is not secrecy, it is sacredness. It is the thin, trembling membrane that protects authenticity from exposure. The modern psyche, flooded by the external gaze, often fractures under the weight of performance. The constant sharing of one's image and experience, even in the name of authenticity, paradoxically breeds disconnection from one's real emotions. To always narrate one's life for an audience is to live in a state of partial dissociation. The ones who do not post often intuitively sense this danger. They recognize that constant exposure reshapes consciousness, that when one lives too long under observation, one's sense of self becomes performative, reactive, and externally determined. The non-poster's silence is a way of re-establishing sovereignty over the self, a psychological boundary between being and appearing. This kind of autonomy is deeply psychological. It reflects an internal locus of control, a preference for intrinsic validation rather than extrinsic approval. These individuals tend to anchor their sense of worth in inner coherence rather than in external metrics. Their silence, therefore, is not apathy, but integrity, a decision to inhabit life as it is, rather than as it appears through the glass of others' perception. And yet, the choice not to post often arises not from superiority, but from sensitivity. Those who feel deeply may find the digital realm too harsh, too loud, too fast, a place where nuance dissolves into spectacle. For them, privacy is not withdrawal from life, but a way of preserving its texture. The inward gaze is not self-absorption, it is self-listening, the art of hearing one's own thoughts before they are drowned in the collective noise. The weight of constant visibility. There is a certain fatigue that settles into the modern mind, a tiredness that comes from being too visible, too legible, too available. The psychology of those who refrain from posting often emerges as a response to this exhaustion. They have felt, perhaps even unconsciously, the psychological cost of constant visibility. Social media operates as a theater of comparison. It reduces the vast complexities of being into curated fragments, each competing for recognition. Within this endless competition, self-worth becomes tethered to quantifiable markers: likes, shares, followers, metrics that simulate validation but never truly satisfy it. The non-poster, whether consciously or intuitively, rejects this economy of worth. To constantly perform oneself before an audience erodes the intimacy of one's inner life. The soul becomes a commodity, the self a brand, and authenticity a rehearsed illusion. In such an environment, those who do not post act as psychological conservationists, preserving something raw, unmarketed, and sacred within themselves. Their refusal is a defense mechanism against fragmentation, a way to protect the fragile continuity of identity. In the constant exposure of the digital gaze, the seer becomes the seen, until nothing remains unseen. For those who do not post, the opposite becomes true: they reclaim the right to be invisible. This invisibility is not a loss of identity, but its reclamation. It allows them to remain whole in a world that demands pieces. The digital self and the mirror stage of the soul. In the 21st century, mirrors have multiplied. They no longer hang upon walls. They live within screens, reflecting not our faces but our narratives, our staged versions, our pixelated selves. Every post becomes a mirror held up to the ego, a reflection that hungers not for clarity but for confirmation. To not post is, in a sense, to step away from this hall of mirrors, to risk being unseen in order to remain unfractured. The French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan once spoke of the mirror stage, the moment when a child first recognizes their reflection and identifies it as I. It is the birth of self-consciousness, but also the beginning of alienation. The self-seen is never the self-lived. On social media, this mirror stage repeats endlessly. Each photo, caption, and comment is a reflection in which the self becomes both performer and observer, lover and critic, prisoner and warden. Those who do not post escape this recursive loop. Their identity is not continually rehearsed in the public eye but remains grounded in private experience. They experience life not as an image but as presence. This quiet rejection of digital self-display is a profound psychological act, one that defies the seduction of simulated intimacy. They choose to inhabit their consciousness rather than externalize it. For the non-poster, there is no need to prove existence through documentation. Life is its own witness. The sunset does not require a caption. The feeling does not demand to be shared to be real. This is not asceticism. It is liberation from the mirror's hypnosis. They have found that to truly see oneself, one must sometimes turn away from reflection. The fear of misunderstanding and the intimacy of silence. To post is to expose. And exposure, while seductive, is dangerous for the sensitive. Those who refrain often do so not because they lack expression, but because their expression is too delicate for the violence of misunderstanding. They sense deeply the weight of being misconstrued in a world that consumes personalities like fast food, tasting quickly, digesting nothing. Psychologically, this reflects a heightened empathy, a refined social sensitivity. These individuals often read emotions finely, perceive undercurrents, and feel the tremor of others' judgments with acute intensity. For such souls, the performative space of social media, where attention is fragmented, irony is currency, and nuance dies in brevity, becomes unbearable. Silence, then, is not absence, it is protection. There is an intimacy in silence that words cannot hold. It is the intimacy of being unseen yet known by oneself, of feeling deeply without broadcasting the feeling, of belonging without proving it. To not post is to preserve this intimacy, the kind that is too sacred for the crowd. Their psychology is one of inward containment. Their joy is not dependent on validation but on resonance with what feels real. They fear not being seen, but being seen falsely, and so they choose to be seen by fewer eyes, but with greater truth. The myth of connection and the shadow of the collective. Social media promised connection, but delivered contact. It gave us networks, but not necessarily relationships. It replaced community with visibility and intimacy with exposure. The psychology of those who do not post often stems from a recognition, conscious or unconscious, that this form of connection carries a shadow. The shadow of the collective is conformity. The pressure to join the chorus, to align with the dominant narrative, to present oneself as perpetually certain, happy, or righteous. The digital crowd rewards expression that is predictable, binary, and loud. Subtlety has no algorithmic advantage. And yet the human soul is subtle. It breathes in nuance, contradiction, paradox. To remain oneself in such an environment often requires retreat. Carl Jung wrote that the crowd is the gathering place of the weakest. Not as an insult, but as a warning, individuality dissolves where mass psychology dominates. The ones who do not post are, in many ways, resisting this dissolution. Their silence is an assertion of identity, an act of individuation in the midst of digital homogeneity. To them, the crowd's noise is not evil, but it is anesthetic. It numbs. It flattens. Their withdrawal is not judgmental but instinctive, a yearning to remain awake, to preserve thought from contagion, to keep emotion unprogrammed. They refuse to let their psyche become an echo of the feed. The spiritual dimension, silence as sacred ground. Beneath the psychological lies the spiritual. To abstain from posting is not merely a behavioral choice. It is often a symptom of an inner orientation toward presence. In every tradition, silence is the gateway to transcendence. The mystic retreats from the marketplace not because the world is evil, but because the noise of the world drowns the subtle music of the soul. The digital realm, by contrast, thrives on interruption. It interrupts thought, emotion, solitude, and time. To post is to join this rhythm of interruption. To not post is to break it, to allow stillness to exist again. The one who does not post practices, perhaps unknowingly, a kind of digital asceticism. They renounce the instant feedback loop for the slow unfolding of inner truth. In their silence lies a sacred refusal, a refusal to turn life into spectacle, to sell the sacred for attention. Their absence from the feed is a kind of prayer, a prayer to remain real. They live as if every moment need not be witnessed to be holy, as if existence itself is already enough. And perhaps this is their quiet wisdom, that the soul's most meaningful experiences cannot be photographed, captioned, or shared. They can only be lived, remembered, and transformed into quiet light. The emotional landscape, anxiety, ambivalence, and liberation. Not all silence is serene. For some, the refusal to post is not born of peace but of anxiety, the fear of exposure, the paralysis of perfectionism, or the wound of invisibility. The psychology here becomes more complex. Silence can be both armor and cage. Those who have been hurt by judgment, comparison, or rejection may retreat into non-posting as self-defense. Their quietness is not rebellion but refuge. In this, one can see both pain and wisdom. The refusal to participate is a boundary drawn by a scar, a line between what once hurt and what will no longer be allowed to. And yet, over time, this very silence can mature into strength. What begins as fear becomes discernment. What begins as withdrawal becomes clarity. The non-poster learns to inhabit their solitude without shame, to find in it not emptiness but restoration. Psychologically, this is the movement from reactive to intentional silence, from avoidance to sovereignty. It mirrors the process of individuation, the transformation of shadow into self-awareness. Their non-participation evolves into a conscious philosophy. I will share only what is true, only when it is born from stillness, not from the need to be seen. In this lies emotional liberation, the quiet joy of no longer needing an audience. The future of silence. As the digital tide deepens, the ones who do not post become rarer, and therefore more essential. They remind us of something we have almost forgotten, that silence has its own frequency, and that not everything worth living is worth sharing. The future may well belong to them, to those who have learned how to remain human amidst the circuitry of constant display. To not post on social media is not merely to abstain from sharing. It is to reimagine what it means to exist. It is to live without the mirror's distortion, without the constant rehearsal of self. It is to belong to one's life directly, without mediation. Psychologically, it is the choice of autonomy over approval, of authenticity over attention, of being over appearing. Spiritually, it is the rediscovery of sacred silence, the stillness in which the soul rediscovers its own voice. The quiet ones, those who do not post, are not absent. They are the hidden witnesses of an age that has forgotten how to listen. They do not seek to impress, to persuade, or to be remembered. They simply live, fully, privately, beautifully, as if the world itself were enough. And perhaps, in the end, they are the freest of us all.